you know, my experience with Beaton, that affected me a great deal, Cecil Beaton. Because with Cecil Beaton, I remember when I was in the Air Force, I wrote a letter to him and said, I like your work so much that when I come out of this Air Force into Civvy Street, I wonder whether I could come and meet you and discuss photography. And he kindly invited me to tea. And I remember going to his house and being met by a butler at the door, invited in to tea. And Cecil Beaton came in and he said, what can I do for you? I said, I'd love to see some of your work. And he showed me some lovely techniques of Marlene Dietrich. And he said, that, in what way can I help you? I said, well, I was thinking of taking this up as a profession. He said, no, I wouldn't, my boy, it's overcrowded, don't do it. And about 10 years later, he was photographing Sabu at Denham, and they asked me to assist him. And during the session, I said to him, you remember me? He said, no. I said, you told me not to take up photography. He said, I knew you would, you silly boy. So that was that. You could not photograph on a small camera because when a portrait was taken, it was retouched. The bigger negative was better for retouching. In fact, we were the plastic surgeons of the day. And these negatives could be contacted, printed, 1,000 copies within a few days to go all over the world. And you could only do that by doing contact prints from a 10 by 8. Any smaller camera wasn't accepted. And the definition was perfect. It was quite a job to set the lens and go back to the camera back to put the plate in to pull the sheath out. I think it was, I had an assistant, but it was very, very difficult to get that special focus. I always concentrate on the eyes of the sitter. That was the important thing to me. And if I could get those sharp, I let the rest take its own place. When I photographed Marlene Dietrich, I actually did 5 pictures, and I would do about 4 negatives on each shot. And if I was lucky, I would get 1 out of 4 because of the fine focus. So really, I was using sometimes on a session 25 10 by 8 negatives to get 5 pictures.
That's quite a good ratio.
Well, it was very difficult because you had to get that very fine focus on the eyes and lips and let the rest go. But, you know, between the time you focused and if they were smoking a cigarette, they could easily move backwards or forwards out of focus. In fact, I got in the end a measuring rod, which I kept. I just pulled it out to the sitter's shoulder and said, keep there. And they were very patient because they loved sitting in front of a camera. It was like looking at themselves in a mirror because it was a very large lens and they could see reflections of themselves. So it was an ego trip. Rank had this wonderful system, I think, of the time, which was similar to Hollywood, is that they had various departments all under contract. And this goes for writers, cameramen, directors, producers. So it was a very well-established studio system they had. And you had the opportunity to work with some of the most wonderful people. You see, I was actually photographing Gregory Peck when he said to me, you know, Cornel, Hollywood is changing rapidly. And I said, in what way, Greg? And he said, well, artists are not longer under contract to studios. They're now going out on their own limb. And so be prepared for it over here. Dinah Dawes was a past master at creating her own publicity. And she said to me, Cornel, I believe you're going to Venice Film Festival. I'll be there, and I've got a special photograph I want you to take. I said, right, let me know when you want it taken. And when we're there, she said, I'd like you to be in a boat when I come out in this gondola and take the necessary pictures. Well, when I wondered what she was up to. I wondered whether she'd taken all her clothes off. But in fact, out came the gondola and she took her coat off, her wrap, and there she was in a mink bikini. It was the hottest day I've ever remembered. But it wasn't mink, it was rabbit. But there was, and it got international coverage throughout the world, in every paper. In 1959, I had taken a holiday in the south of France, and at the villa, I went to a luncheon, and there was David Niven, Jack Hawkins, Michael Parr, Antonio the Spanish dancer. There was a various number around the table having lunch, and we all had a few drinks, and I said, well, I'm enjoying myself so much, I'm going to send a telegram to Rank and ask them for an extra week's holiday. And the next day I got a reply, we cannot allow another week's holiday, you've got to get back to the studio because we've got so many people to be photographed. So I said to the table, there was about 12 people around the luncheon table, I said to David Niven, I think we should take a, no, he said, Cornel, I think we should take a vote on whether you should resign from the Rank organisation. So they took a vote, and the vote was overwhelming. I must have left Pinewood by sheer, that meeting with all those artists in South France and said resign. I think from then on, the film industry seemed to have changed. Artists were no longer being put under contract. The studio system was not being carried out as it used to be. And the entire system of photography changed. And even now, a photographer is not always employed on films. That's changed. But I could see the system going, and I think I moved out at the right time.